Welcome to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire, a series that digs deep into the life and works of one of the greatest novelists of all time. Hi everyone, it's that time of year when the shadow of All Hallows Eve has yet to shrink from the glowing light of Advent. Out in the streets, the pumpkins are slowly turning to pulp, their carved faces slowly sinking. But before they moulder and turn grey, there are many more ghostly episodes for you, the listener, to pass through. Last week, I spoke to the inimitable Dr. Kirstin Mills, Senior Lecturer and Director of the Master of Research and Graduate Diploma of Research in the Faculty of Arts at Macquarie University, Sydney. Her recent articles include the chapter Morphean Space and the Metaphysics of Nightmare, published in Gothic Dreams and Nightmares for Manchester University Press. Our conversation therefore flits and tumbles through the realms of the 19th century nightmares, many of which are sure to have visited the young Charles Dickens, thanks to the bedtime stories told to him by Mary Weller, and the books he would later read voraciously. You must expect to meet demons, vampires, and the much overlooked Headless Horseman, and one of my favourite literary creations of all time, thanks to Washington Irving, Ichabod Crane. Kirstin, hello, happy Halloween, and welcome to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire.
Thank you so much. Happy Halloween to you as well. I'm very excited to be here.
The article that you wrote on the Headless Horseman, I was so enthralled by that because I actually hadn't read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And just to start off with, that is so funny.
Isn't it so funny? And that's something we don't expect because we've come to know it more through its adaptations now in, either Disney adaptations or any of the sort of horror films or television shows that adapt this Headless Horseman as a big, scary Halloween creature. And yet the story itself, it's so funny. And there's a lot of it that isn't particularly gothic or necessarily about the Headless Horseman himself. It's so clever.
No, it's funny actually because the Headless Horseman doesn't feature anywhere near as much as you think it's going to.
Yeah.
In the whole setup and about this kind of magical, strange place, Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
And how do you feel towards Ichabod Crane? How do you feel towards him?
He's the lovable anti-hero, I think. I feel a bit sorry for the poor guy. He's so brilliantly characterized by Washington Irving. He's such a beautiful satirical version of masculinity at the time, sort of the antithesis of what was held up as the kind of masculine ideals. He's very much the intellectual. He's reserved. He's got the sort of knocked knees and lanky legs, and this is very much part of Washington Irving's point. Is setting him up as this kind of somebody we feel a bit sorry for, I think.
He was tall, but exceedingly lank, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame most loosely hung together. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long snipe nose, so that it looked like a weathercock perched upon his spindle neck to tell which way the wind blew. Yes, the description is amazing. There's even a line about him looking like some scarecrow that had eloped from a cornfield.
Exactly.
And then in your article, you connect man and beast, so you connect them to horse, and poor Ichabod, the horse that I think he hires, called Gunpowder. Again.
Brilliant description of this poor horse as well, as this absolutely clapped out horse that's just, it's got nothing left in it. It's got one sort of devilish eye that doesn't work anymore, and it's just got a mean spirit. It can't be tamed, and poor Ichabod has no horsemanship.
The animal he bestrode was a broken-down plough horse that had outlived almost everything but its viciousness. He was gaunt and shagged, with a ewe-neck and a head like a hammer. His rusty mane and tail were tangled and knotted with burrs. One eye had lost its pupil and was glaring and spectral, but the other had the gleam of a genuine devil in it.
And this is part of what Washington Irving is doing with his sort of critique of masculinity here. Ichabod Crane attempts to ride this horse, and it's just every time he tries to turn left, it goes right, and every time he tries to turn right, it goes left, and then it starts running and he can't stay on, and the saddle goes upside down, and it's just all a big mess.
Ichabod was a suitable figure for such a steed. He rode with short stirrups, which brought his knees nearly up to the pommel of the saddle. His sharp elbows stuck out like grasshoppers. He carried his whip perpendicularly in his hand, like a sceptre, and as his horse jogged on, the motion of his arms was not unlike the flapping of a pair of wings. And his great rival for the love of Katrina Van Tassel.
Yes, Brombones.
Brombones, who's on the opposite pole of kind of manliness to Ichabod.
Absolutely. We still see these guys around today, the kind that walk around as if they're carrying carpets under their arms, like they've just been to the gym, puffed up. This is Brombones. He's a stereotype even back then, and he's the hero, the rascal, the daredevil. He rides his horse called Daredevil as well. And the both of them have this kind of synergy between man and beast. And, Brombones is very much in control of his horse that no one else can control. And he's also got a bit of a mean spirit, a bit of a bully about him, as poor Ichabod Crane finds out.
Yes, and he likes his horse Daredevil because he's untamable and vicious.
Yes.
Brombones, however, was the hero of the scene, having come to the gathering on his favourite steed, Daredevil, a creature like himself, full of mettle and mischief, and which no one but himself could manage. He was in fact noted for preferring vicious animals, given to all kinds of tricks which kept the rider in constant risk of his neck, for he held a tractable, well-broken horse as unworthy of a lad of spirit. But it feels to me so Dickensian. I mean, it feels so much to me like Dickens obviously loved Washington Irving and seems to have taken a lot of inspiration in terms of style from him. Even the long descriptions of food when they go to the party.
Yes.
And all of that feels so Dickensian.
Very much.
There were apple pies and peach pies and pumpkin pies, besides slices of ham and smoked beef, and moreover delectable dishes of preserved plums and peaches and pears and quinces, not to mention broiled shad and roasted chickens, together with bowls of milk and cream, all mingled higgledy-piggledy.
That's so Dickensian.
Yep, absolutely. And just another favourite is just the description of Ichabod's dancing.
Yes.
There's not a single limb that's idle. Ichabod prided himself upon his dancing as much as upon his vocal powers. Not a limb, not a fibre about him was idle, and to have seen his loosely hung frame in full motion and clattering about the room, you would have thought that St. Vitus himself, that blessed patron of the dance, was figuring before you in person.
You just feel like you pressed yourselves against the wall there to avoid being elbowed in the face or something.
But it's so relatable, isn't it? Because, nobody wants to admit to being Ichabod in any respect, but we've definitely seen that person or in some form, some aspect of that. And
absolutely.
But you talk about in your article here about something about the fusion of man and beast and how that perhaps in itself is some sort of monster.
Yeah, so this is why I love the Headless Horseman as a ghost so much, because it's not just the ghost, it's the ghost on horseback. So it's a ghost horse as well, but they kind of, you can't separate them. You don't really see the Headless Horseman without his horse. It says in the story that he hitches his horse to the graveyard, but you never see that. It's just sort of part of the whispers and the legends that are setting up for this moment of encounter with the alleged Headless Horseman, which may of course be Brombones in disguise, but Washington Irving leaves that really open to our interpretation.
Yeah, I think it is Brombones.
I like to have it both ways. I like my cake and I will eat it too.
Sure. So in terms of the Gothic, the Gothic is obviously deep into your vocabulary and your whole experience as an academic. I always slightly feel, because the word's used quite a lot, I always feel like everyone seems to understand what that word means more than me. I always struggle a little bit to get to grips with it. How do you explain it? How do you perceive it?
It's a tricky one. I think rather befitting of the Gothic, and this is part of what the Gothic is something a bit amorphous, a bit hard to define, a bit fuzzy around the edges. It blurs boundaries. The Gothic is very concerned with particularly a sense of the return of the past, something buried emerging into the light, something repressed returning. We see this with pretty much all of the supernatural spectres. Anything, that sense of something haunting is by definition something from the past returning into the present, kind of interjecting itself, usually in a shocking or an unpleasant kind of way, usually bringing some sort of revelation to the people experiencing it. It doesn't have to be supernatural. But it often is. It could also be, and this is throughout the Victorian period in particular, they switched their storytelling in the Gothic. It was kind of a journey, I guess, from the old mouldering castles that were very much set in the medieval period, and they start exploring a more psychological Victorian sense of the Gothic as potential sort of madness and dreams are bound up in that. And this is what my research looks at, is that boundary line where dreams kind of bridge ghosts and the supernatural and contemporary life and modern psychology. And there's kind of the bridge through which the Gothic moves from its olden day kind of old world ghost stories to modern day explorations of everything we still fear, everything that the Victorian society, as if I could sort of characterize it and generalize it as a whole, which we shouldn't really do, but everything people repress is right there in the modern Gothic, and we still have that very much today.
What I find interesting, though, in these stories is, if we're in the 19th century,
the
Victorian era is still kind of understandable to us. We can still kind of hold it almost and understand, despite all our technology and wizardry, we can really feel it, can't we, I think?
Absolutely. I think there are two reasons for that. Partly it's familiar to us in the sense that it's not that long ago compared to some of the earlier forms of society and culture. Post-industrial revolution, things start looking quite similar to us in terms of that experience of being on the cusp of technology. So, for people in the 19th century, that was watching all of these cities grow up around machinery and factories and new technologies emerging, like the telegraph and, the rail network. And for us, it's digital technology and AI, and we're experiencing these very similar upheavals.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that makes it so relatable is what we were saying about the writing styles. In the 19th century, they really start delving into a sense of tangible reality and a psychological reality that wasn't as important to storytelling in earlier generations, where it was more about the kind of spectacular plot points that were happening, and they didn't quite take as much care with characterization, with having a very real sense of a person in a place and a time experiencing a particular moment.
Yes. Does this link at all to Morphean space?
It does.
And Coleridge? What is that all about?
So I love this concept. I'm just so drawn to Coleridge's writing, to his thinking. Just to sort of preface his concept here, Coleridge, as you know, was one of the most well-read, if not the most well-read thinker, I think, at the time, when he was living. And he's so well connected to so many different people as well. He would regularly interact with and hold sort of dinner parties for other writers, sort of scientists, philosophers, like all the different kinds of thinkers. And he would bring them together for this kind of lush, deep conversation about metaphysics, all the sort of the juicy, indefinable parts of life, trying to sort of figure everything out. And he had so many different theories about everything. But one of the most interesting for me was very personal to him. He was plagued by nightmares. He was haunted by nightmares throughout his life. And he spent his whole life attempting to theorize this, to explain what was happening, because these dreams that he in his notebooks, it's full of recordings of his nightmares and dreams, and he calls them hell pretending nightmares and scream dreams, and all of these wonderful phrases. They're evocative phrases that just really capture how hellish these experiences must have been. And in them are these demonic sort of figures that are attempting to break out of his dream space. And some of them, my favorite examples, are so chilling, where the demon attempts to grasp his eye, for example, and grabs hold of it, and Coleridge wakes but still feels the sensation of something there with him.
Friday night, November the 28th, 1800. Or rather, Saturday morning. A most frightful dream of a woman whose features were blended with darkness, catching hold of my right eye and attempting to pull it out. I caught her arm fast. A horrid feel. Wordsworth cried out aloud to me, hearing my scream, heard his cry and thought it cruel he did not come, but did not wake till his cry was repeated a third time. When I awoke, my right eyelid swelled.
So this idea that something supernatural, a demonic being from within his dream, could cross over into the natural world, the waking world.
Right.
And so this is where his concept of Morphean space, or he calls it somnial space as well, this kind of dream space, sleeping space, emerges. And he configures dreams as a kind of liminal kind of realm of their own, where when you're sleeping and the brain is sort of the will, the conscious will is not active, it's asleep. And so the soul is kind of free to move. And he, in typical Coleridgean sense, he sort of links the soul with the great powers of imagination and things like that. And so the soul is free to move around, and it enters this space that overlaps with a very real sense of the supernatural world. And so we're not just sort of making up images in our heads when we're dreaming, we're actually entering a space where the demons we might encounter are potentially real. And so this is an idea he has, and he draws on a lot of different philosophies of the supernatural to kind of create this idea. He's also thinking about early brain science that's emerging at the time. And this is an idea he wrestles with. He doesn't necessarily lock onto this as exactly what's happening, but it's an idea that haunts him, and it continues to haunt him as a possibility that absolutely terrifies him.
Gosh, does he come out the other side of it? Does he settle?
No.
Okay, no, he's just
no.
just scared his whole life.
Pretty much, he wavers in and out of different theories, but I think what makes this so compelling for me is that it haunts him, it dogs him throughout his whole life as something he can't prove doesn't happen. It's a typical sort of problem we have with the idea of ghosts, is that we can't prove they don't exist. We can't necessarily prove they do, depending on who you talk to, but you can't sort of prove a negative. So this is, I think, the driving force behind not only what Coleridge is thinking, but the 19th century kind of explosion of interest in the supernatural and the rise of spiritualism and the rise of things like, the Ghost Club, which Dickens was a member of, or the Society for Psychical Research, which came after it. And these are sort of pseudo-academic societies that bring people together to attempt to genuinely scientifically investigate and verify claims of the supernatural. So they'd go out to all of these houses and manor houses around England and, the UK, and they would attempt to measure the purported ghostly activity and write up a report about whether it was real or not.
They were kind of Ghostbusters.
Absolutely, they were Ghostbusters.
That's amazing. So where does Dickens feature in that then? Does he really go for it?
Yeah, so Dickens, again, much like Coleridge, I think he spent his whole life fascinated by the supernatural. But Dickens has a really interesting resistance to it as well. He's very self-conscious, I think. So Dickens comes a lot later. Coleridge was writing right when the Gothic kind of explodes onto the publishing scene as a huge thing, and everybody's telling ghost stories and everybody's hosting parties to sort of read and perform these ghost stories aloud to each other and spook each other silly, which just sounds so much fun. But Dickens comes obviously later than that. And so by mid-19th century, the Gothic has become a stereotype. And this sort of interest in the supernatural, as much as it is gaining traction again by the time Dickens is writing, it's also a bit of a stereotype. This idea of the credulity of superstitious people who have lost their sense of rationality. And obviously Dickens is great at lampooning the extremes of society and foibles in people. And this is an easy target. People who implicitly believe in every ghost story they hear, or think every bump in the night must be some sort of demon walking down the hallway. So Dickens is intrigued by ghost stories and the supernatural, and he had, he was his nurse, who I think was a 14-year-old girl at the time when he was a child, would tell him ghost stories.
Oh, was this Mary Weller?
Yes.
Yeah. Captain Murderer and all of that.
Yes. She must have been wonderful. I wish I could hang out with her and hear a story from her lips, because it would have been so fun, but so terrifying for a small boy attempting to go to sleep.
The young woman who brought me acquainted with Captain Murderer had a fiendish enjoyment of my terrors, and used to begin, I remember, as a sort of introductory overture by clawing the air with both hands and uttering a low, hollow groan. So acutely did I suffer from this ceremony, in combination with this infernal captain, that I sometimes used to plead I thought I was hardly strong enough and old enough to hear the story again just yet, but she never spared me a word of it.
She kind of instills in him, I think, this fear and fascination, and I think that's the Gothic essence, isn't it? It's this fascination with this, but fear of it, and it's this dual kind of emotional pull that we experience. And this, we still do this with we flock to see sort of the latest horror movie when it comes out. We're terrified but excited to be there, and we have the exact same thrill. And this is what Dickens is drawn by as well. And so I think he spends his life fascinated by the supernatural, but he needs solid evidence because he's a very rational, practical man. Part of the Ghost Club, I think that's what he's looking for. But also he's attempting to sort of stamp out this what he sees as this rampant explosion of just wild belief in the supernatural with no evidence whatsoever.
Yes, so I'm just trying to think which Ghostbuster that would make him, but he's the one that sort of doesn't want to... He's out to prove that it's all rubbish.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's publishing magazines where he's kind of controlling the discourse in a way. He's helping other writers publish their ghost stories as well. So he's, on the one hand, he's investigating, if we might call it, a kind of real world supernatural, or at least claims to it. And on the other, he's stoking the fires of the literary supernatural as much as he's poking fun at it. And again, this is one thing I love about Dickens. He takes it seriously in his fiction at the exact same time as he's poking fun at it. It's such as with most of his writing, I think, there's a tongue-in-cheek revelry in the theatrical, in the silly, but there's something very serious and quite deep about his writing as well. And it's this kind of oscillation between these poles that for me makes his writing so compelling, no matter what it is, but particularly when it comes to writing about the supernatural.
What drew you to this personally? How did this become the very centre of your academic research?
I think about this a lot because I've been trying to pinpoint my kind of origin story and I can't do it. I have always been interested in this. When I was very, very small, and probably far too small to be watching these kind of things, it was only The Never-Ending Story, which, and I say only, what a brilliant movie, brilliant. But the wolf, the demon wolf, Gmork, I was very small, but I would sit up and pay attention in that scene. I loved the wolf. I wasn't scared of him the way the other kids would sort of be like, turn off the telly, it's too scary. I lived for that moment. I just thought he was so compelling. He's so creepy. He's there in the gloom. There's this foreboding sense of threatening, this sense that he knows more than he tells, this kind of secrets around him. I loved that. I also really loved The Witch in The Wizard of Oz, and these were kind of two films that we had on VHS and would repeat. So do we need to define VHS for the Gen Zs now?
Yes, that's so interesting. So you were called by the wolf then in The Never-Ending Story, which puts you on the side of the vampires, doesn't it?
It does.
You're not the scared passengers sort of shrinking from them.
No.
They're your children then.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah, friend of the darkness.
Yeah, gosh. And where do vampires feature for you in your whole kind of supernatural space?
It's very much part of it. For me, a lot of these, particularly in the 19th century, the borderlines between what constitutes a vampire, what constitutes a ghost, what constitutes a headless horseman are very porous. We don't yet have quite so much of a sense of distinction between these species of supernatural being, if you like, as we do now, particularly since the advent of television and film, where we're picturing a particular way these beings look. In the 19th century, they're very much bleeding into each other. And so even to go back to Coleridge with his beautiful, beautiful ballad Christabel, this is very vampiric. So this sort of demon who crosses the threshold into a house and sort of psychologically possessing somebody, that's a very vampiric thing to do.
They passed the hall that echoes still, pass as lightly as you will. But when the lady passed, there came a tongue of light, a fit of flame, and Christabel saw the lady's eye, and nothing else saw she thereby. "Oh, softly tread," said Christabel, "my father seldom sleepeth well." She trimmed the lamp, and made it bright, and left it swinging to and fro, while Geraldine, in wretched plight, sank down upon the floor below. "O weary Lady Geraldine, I pray you drink this cordial wine. It is a wine of virtuous powers, my mother made it of wild flowers. And will your mother pity me, who am a maiden most forlorn?" Christabel answered, "Woe is me, she died the hour that I was born. O mother dear, that thou wert here." "I would," said Geraldine, "she were." But soon with altered voice said she,
"Off, wandering mother, peak and pine. I have power to bid thee flee."
And a lot of scholars acknowledge this as one of the earlier examples of vampiric figures kind of appearing in fiction, long before we get to what we sort of acknowledge as the first actual sort of extended vampire fiction in English, shall we say, with John Polidori's The Vampire.
Yeah.
Obviously, by the time we get to Dracula, we're firmly in the territory that we find familiar now. And so my research kind of wavers between all of it. Vampires are very much haunting the borders. And yes, in the future, I'll definitely have more to say about those in particular.
A great title you've got here, Frankenstein in Hyperspace.
Yes.
What's that all about?
So this is a great segue, actually, because, as you know, Frankenstein, the story, was birthed out of a ghost storytelling competition held between Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, Lord Byron, the poet, and John William Polidori. And the vampire, the first sort of acknowledged vampire tale, emerges out of this ghost story competition, the same one that produces Frankenstein. So there's that connection right from the beginning. And another connection, this is what I love about this time period, everybody knows each other. At this ghost storytelling competition, they would sort of, in the Villa Diodati in Italy, in the summer without sunshine, there's sort of volcanic ash clouds make the weather incredibly stormy. It's a dark and stormy night. It's extremely gothic. And so they sort of batten down the hatches in this house, and all together they're reciting German ghost stories, but they're also reciting Coleridge's Christabel, which scares them so much that Percy Shelley runs screaming from the room, very likely under the influence. But nevertheless, they're reading Coleridge, and it inspires their thinking about ghosts. And they have this ghost storytelling competition, and Mary Shelley starts what will become Frankenstein. And Polidori writes a fragment that he abandons, and it is later found, we don't know who by, someone who obviously knew that Byron was staying in the house, and that kind of celebrity that was surrounding him, I think, influences this person to go in, find whatever fragments are left behind by the party when they've left, and he sends it into The Monthly, which is a magazine at the time, and they publish it as the story by Byron. And everybody goes mad for it, and Byron has to quickly come out and say, actually, I didn't write that. Polidori steps up and says, well, I did. Nobody cares. Everybody is obsessed with this vampire tale. So vampires kind of emerge onto the scene there. But to return to Mary Shelley, the other sort of story that emerged out of this space, Frankenstein we know best for the the monster, the creature, don't we? And it's, again, like the Headless Horseman, very much because of the adaptations that we've seen, the films, the sort of appearances in Scooby-Doo cartoons, anything you can imagine. We all have an image of what the monster looks like, and it's probably including the neck bolts, from the film, iconic film versions. The way Mary Shelley writes it, though, that the novel is much more concerned with the ghostly and ghosts and the psychology of encountering the supernatural than we would think if before we read the novel. And I'm really intrigued by this. So Mary Shelley's directly picking up threads of thinking that Coleridge had started in terms of dreams as an access point into the supernatural. And she takes this thinking and just infuses her novel with this. And this is, for me, this is the kind of the other side of the story. This is the ghost haunting the novel, is this idea of the supernatural as a potentially very real space. And there are ghosts in the novel, Frankenstein. Some people claim that, it's not a ghost story, there are no ghosts, but there actually are. So Frankenstein, when he's wandering forlorn and just in bleak landscapes, in increasingly inhospitable, inhuman landscapes, and he's just his lone figure wandering through them. And to get through the days and the nights, to keep him going, he's conversing with the ghosts of his dead family members, most of them murdered by the creature. And he's having these conversations with them, but it's in this kind of dream space. It's this kind of idea that dreams are a kind of vision and ghost seeing is a different kind of vision. And so they're very much blurred here.
I saw the benevolent countenance of my father, heard the silver tones of my Elizabeth's voice, and beheld Clerval enjoying health and youth. Often, when wearied by a toilsome march, I persuaded myself that I was dreaming until night should come, and that I should then enjoy reality in the arms of my dearest friends. What agonizing fondness did I feel for them! How did I cling to their dear forms, as sometimes they haunted even my waking hours.
The ghosts here are very benevolent. They're propping him up and they're helping him. But what's really interesting for me is that Mary Shelley is kind of flipping the poles between day and night and sleeping and waking, natural and supernatural, and even madness and sanity, and just really blurring those borderlines in a very Coleridgean sense, to kind of imply that there is potentially a real supernatural realm and you can access it via these kind of higher states of thinking. And the basis of that particular research project for me was to argue that this kind of early interest in dreams as a bridge into the supernatural realm merges into, by the end of the 19th century, an idea of the supernatural realm as a fourth spatial dimension, a kind of hyperspace, a higher space that is a very real sort of material space, just above and beyond the three dimensions that we can access. So this emerges out of mathematics and non-Euclidean geometry, and it's not meant, in the maths, it's not meant to imply that there is an actual physical space. But of course, the spiritualists get hold of it, and they say, this is proof, this is mathematical and scientific proof that the supernatural realm exists. It is just in a dimension beyond our three dimensions that we can access. They get very excited about this. The end of the 19th century is filled with this with these wonderful ideas, and spiritualism is at its height at that point. But my argument is that the lead up to that, what enabled that is this idea of dreams as this kind of access into, and just a general sense of the supernatural realm as something that is a space beyond our material three dimensions, but accessible by our mind.
Yeah. And of course, you immersing yourself in this world, certainly in the literature, so much of it is rooted in the UK or in Europe. And but have you ever found it nearer home? I mean, I'm just coming across an amazing statistic, like 95% of Australia is uninhabited.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? You think the sort of the unknown out there, and I have to say, as a Brit that's never ventured out to Australia, the number of lethal animals you've got out there, like sort of snakes, spiders, crocodiles, sharks. That's quite extraordinary as well, isn't it?
Living so close to death all the time.
So, have you ever seen a ghost?
I don't know. I hope I have. So I stayed, one of the places I stayed in England, I was Jamaica Inn.
Oh, yeah.
Jamaica Inn, made famous by Daphne du Maurier's novel of that same name, is also reputedly one of the most haunted places in the UK. It's supposed to be, and it's got its specific rooms that are meant to be more haunted than others. And I thought, great, this is for me. And I was just traveling by myself, driving around, and it was a.
Oh, it just gets worse. It gets worse and worse.
It was nearing Christmas, so it's the nights are falling in very early, and I'd been out hiking over the moors and everything, and it was incredible. I absolutely loved it. But I would stumble into the inn after dark, and it was all sort of freezing cold. And I was staying in the room that was meant to be the most haunted. And every night I'd sort of go to sleep and think, this is the night. It's going to be so great. I'm going to see a ghost. But I was so exhausted from having hiked everywhere throughout the day that I just had the best sleep I've ever had and didn't wake up. I don't know if a ghost was standing there trying to shake me awake, but it didn't work. I was too asleep.
I was so angry with you.
I know. So this is your moment and you're sleeping through it. Except the part where the ghost does come in, I think, and I hope. I was outside. It was one of my last nights, and I like photography. It's a sort of hobby of mine. And I was out with my camera on its tripod, attempting to take kind of a long exposure shot of the inn at night against the night sky. And it looked really beautiful. But because it was a long exposure, it requires people to not be in the shot or they will blur and get in the way. And so I was patiently waiting for people to go inside. It was quite a cold night, so it wasn't too bad. There weren't too many people around. And I put my eye to the viewfinder to compose my shot, and I remember immediately irritated because there was a man in the way. And he was standing out the front of the inn, and he had one of those tri-cornered hats, those three-cornered kind of Cornish hats on. And I thought, this man's gone into the gift shop and he's got a silly hat on. What's he doing standing in front of the inn? And I've raised my head almost in irritation. I wasn't going to say anything to him, but I've raised my head in kind of irritation, and he wasn't there. I could only see him through the camera. And I like to think that was a real ghost. I really hope it was.
God, that's amazing. Well, Kirstin, thank you so much. You've been a brilliant sport. Thank you for going into all of these scary topics and creatures and monsters for us.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad we finally got to do this.
Oh, me too.
Your other episodes are so great as well. So
thank you.
Congratulations. And it's genuinely an honour to be included. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire. If you're enjoying these episodes and would like to make a small donation towards the costs of producing them, please follow the link at the bottom of the description and you can make a donation there. Every coffee you buy makes a huge difference. Thank you ever so much, and see you next time.